Good morning, YouTube. I thought I'd make a little video today. I've done a few of these in Dutch, but I think it's interesting enough to make a few in English as well. About a few DIY projects, a couple of things that I specialize in the kitchen. About processing, in this case we're going to be processing a few pieces of meat. More specifically, we'll be making some cooked ham from a piece of leg of pork, and we're going to be making some bacon. We're going to be curing them, smoking them. The ham that we're going to be making is going to be cooked ham. So we're going to be making some hot smoked ham. Very nice to use on, well, anything like sandwiches, salads, in the kitchen for any application, or just eat as is. We're going to be processing some bacon. Bacon that you can use, well, basically for anything you use bacon for. So we're going to be making bacon that can be used for bacon and eggs, used for making lovely pasta carbonara, any kind of application, but this is going to be cold smoked bacon. So we're going to be smoking this bacon and making some cold smoked bacon that's basically to be used in cooking applications. And we're going to be showing how easy it is to do this by yourself in your own kitchen. Now, first thing we're going to do, just to make the bacon a little bit more easy to process, we have a raw piece of bacon. Maybe something I forgot to mention is the meat of choice that we chosen. If you're making homemade deli meats, in this case I've chosen two pieces that are that come from a biological pig farm not too far from where I live. Basically they're called Yurok pigs, but they're pigs that are still allowed to run and root around and wallow in the mud just like a good pig should. And it really shows, especially if you're making deli meats, better to choose a good cut of quality meat instead of some industrially raised pig that basically spends its life in stress in a pen. So, but first thing what we're gonna do is, I've already taken a little head start, but just to make it easy to process, we've got a piece of raw bacon. So one thing I'm gonna do is remove the rind. So what you do basically, very easily, handy tool for this is a boning knife, otherwise any other kitchen knife can do, but to get a head start, you basically try to get a little angle out of the rind, and furthermore you just keep cutting, pulling, and try and remove the rind as cleanly as possible until basically, sometimes if you have enough pull, not in this case, you can even pull it off, but until basically the rind comes off. As you can see, there might be a little scrap of meat that's hanging onto it. Nothing too bad, nothing too worrisome. So, but we want to remove the rind because, well, it's very tough. You can even use this for some stuff. You can render out the bacon fat and use that, or you can actually eat this. I know a lot of my Brazilian friends love to eat this, but best is to remove the rind because it just makes for easier cutting meat. It's not strictly necessary for the curing process, but it makes it easier to process the meat afterwards. We've gotten one stage ahead. Our meat is now processed and we are ready to start brining. So first of all, what we're going to do is make a brine. A brine, well, basically a very simple brine is a sugar and salt solution. In this case I mixed about 400 grams. That's about my magic ratio, 400 grams of salt to 100 grams of sugar. And this is going to go into our brining container, of which soon will contain about 5 liters of water. So first of all, we can use our spoon to pretty much try and dissolve most of the salt. So as I said, basic brining solution is just salt and sugar in water, but to give some more flavorings we of course also want to add some spices. So I had here a spice mix that I pretty much crushed up. I gave a little slight toasting in over some low heat, just so that the aromatic oils will come free a lot easier. And again, we're going to dissolve this into our brining container. So as you can see, what I have here is basically a container which with a few hinges I can close with a lid. But any plastic container will do for a brining container. So as I said, mainly salt and water for a more natural brine. And you can add any spices that you like. Now, a couple of classics for using pork. Stuff like mustard seeds, juniper berries, sorry. So mustard seeds, juniper berries, those are pretty much a must-have. You can use garlic. I use some fresh herb like some thyme from the garden, bay leaf, cloves, you name it. I like to use even, to give a little bit of a sweet touch to the meat, add in some cinnamon, but you can go about as crazy as you want for yourself. But as I said, a couple of classics like mustard seed, like bay leaves, they are very, juniper berries, they are very classically used in the use of brined pork. So all that's left is basically to put our meats. We're going to add some more water in a few minutes. But to put our meats into our water and wait. That's basically it. We wait. Now, how long do you wait? That depends a bit upon the preparation. If you're making, in this case, like the bacon, it's a fairly small piece. So probably 12 hours of brining will suffice. For the ham, I'll probably give it a few more hours because it's a bit meatier chunk. But you can do anything from, let's just say, 4 or 5 hours for ribs, up until 2 weeks if you're making dried ham. But that's basically a bit learning, experience, and getting better at the process. But this is basically how you make any kind of cured meat. As you see, it's very simple, 5 minutes of work, and it's very easy to do. Maybe just one little note to some people who have some experience with processing meats. I know that some people might be wondering, are you not going to use any curing salts? My very simple answer to that is no. When I'm making meat like this, when I'm making sausage, any kind of meat preparation that I do, I don't use curing salts. Curing salts are basically a type of salt which has added nitrite, which basically, well, it's sold in most meat processing plants use it basically as what they call it, a preservant. What it actually does in realistic life, it doesn't really preserve anything. The salt and sugar in this mixture will preserve the meat. That's basically what curing or what brining does. It provides, or it makes that the meat becomes too salty for bacteria to actually fester or grow in it, and indeed make the meat unhealthy. Curing salts only do one thing. They provide that nice little pink color that you see on, well, if you buy ham or bacon from the store, that pinkish color, that's actually what curing salts do. Basically, it's a trick from the industry that they've been using since the 20s to make meat look more appealing or fresh to the consumer. That's what curing salts are really for. They say that it's a preservative, but basically it just makes that the meat looks a little fresher to the eye. While, I mean, if you're honest, if you're working with any kind of processed meat, if you roast a piece of pork is not pink in color. It turns brown grayish, but it's not pink. This pink color is something used by curing salts to make it look indeed more appealing and make it look more fresh for a longer time. But again, I don't use it. Just salt, sugar, spices, and about 5 minutes of work, and we're off to brine our meat. Good morning, everybody. So we're into day 2 of, well, basically both of our projects, making our meat and making some cheese, or smoking some cheese at least. So we have a few things on in our smoker, being our piece of ham, our bacon. We also put some garlic bulbs in there. very nice to do. Garlic conserves a lot longer when it's smoked, plus of course you get a nice smoky flavor. And what we're going to be doing, I was planning on first doing hot and cold, but due to some time constraints, I'm basically going to be using just cold smoke. So what you see here in the bottom, it's a cold smoke spiral filled with some sawdust, oak sawdust, some herbs are in there, and some smoking chips. This can basically be set alight with just a simple tea light, which we're going to be setting under there for a few minutes, after which we can put the tea light out and it can basically be allowed to smolder for about 10 to 12 hours. Well, our piece of ham has been smoked for about 10 hours. So now there's about one thing to do, that's cook the ham. Since we chose to cold smoke this one, along with the other pieces of meat and cheese, we're basically gonna choose our vessel of cooking as an oven. So I'm gonna set it low position in the oven, and it's gonna cook at about 100 degrees centigrade for, I guess, about 1 hour and a half, just to mimic the conditions of a smoker somewhat. So low temperature for a good long time, so that we basically get meat that's very well cooked through but still juicy on the inside. We're about 1.5 days into our meat projects. So our meat has been brined. Our piece of bacon is basically also smoked. Ready, this is going into the cellar where it's gonna hang and air dry for a few more days before, I guess probably this time next week, this will make some lovely pasta carbonara. Our ham is also cooked through and ready to, we'll try and have a little taste test. There we go. So we're ready to try. All I can say, the flavor is very intense, bit sweet, bit salty, not too much, nicely smoky. So unfortunately you can't neither smell or taste, but the smell coming off of it is already very scrumptious, very incredible. The taste, well, it definitely tastes like cured ham, or like cooked or grilled ham, in this case would. As you can see, just as I said, as for color, this is not pink. This is indeed brown cooked pork. So, but the taste, it does taste like cooked ham. Has a very nice flavor. And it tastes like, well, what it is. A proper bit of well-made good food. I'm sure that some people will say, well, I do still prefer the stuff from the supermarket. It tastes a little bit, I don't know, more to my liking or whatever, but it doesn't entirely taste like the stuff from the supermarket, but it tastes like cooked or grilled ham. As I said, a proper bit of good food with no preservatives, no additives, no colorants, no nothing. So naturally made, good food, very good food. This is very good, as I said, sliced on sandwiches. This is nice to eat as is, in a salad. You can use this any way you like. Basically, as is, you can preserve this 3 to 4 weeks. It won't go bad, but you can preserve it in optimal flavor 3 to 4 weeks in the fridge as is. Otherwise, you can still slice it up or not and freeze it and keep it for longer. But I'd ideally advise you to keep this maximum 3 to 4 weeks in the fridge as is for optimal flavor. But again, as it's been brined, as it's been cooked, it won't spoil, but the flavor at one time will turn sour if you leave it for too long. Unless, of course, you try to freeze it. But you could keep this for a few weeks in the fridge. This, you can air dry it for as long as you like. It won't go bad anymore. The only thing is, Ideally, again, 3 to 4 weeks is probably ideal to consume as is. Otherwise, again, I'd advise putting it in the freezer. But you can air dry this and it will only improve in taste. It'll cure, it'll air dry just like cured ham. You can cure this. Italians cure this for pretty long time until they have pretty dry bacon. But again, ideally you'll probably want to air dry this for 3 to 4 weeks in a cool area where you have plenty of air, and you can basically let this air dry, get firm up a little bit, use as is, or again, if you want to conserve for longer, you could air dry for longer. I've tried up to 4 months and it's still edible or perfectly usable, but it gets to a point where it gets a little dry and hard to use. So I'd advise after 3, 4, 6 weeks, probably just cut it up and freeze it to keep for longer if you wish. So as you see, 10-15 minutes of proper work, a little bit more patience, and you can actually make some very simple meat preparations yourself without too much hassle and too much materials.